Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Helenique Argeru, and I am bringing you someone extravisionary today. This is a special opportunity for you to get to know people that have a new vision, a new take, and a way of explaining a deeper reality to us through their own experience. And today, my guest is Judi Miller. She's a transformational author, coach, and speaker, inspiring us to live more passionately in life and to be living in a life with greater clarity, joy, and happiness. There's something really interesting about Judi Miller, and she's going to tell us more about it in a moment. But for now, I'll share with you that she has a very interesting book, which carries with it some incredible experiences. And she's going to share with me some of that during my interview with her today. The book itself is called Perfect, and it's a path to love, forgiveness, and transformation. And it tells us some deeper realities about life and the kinds of experiences that Judi Miller had in order to come into a wholeness, a kind of orchestration of a path, which really helped to understand more about generational and individual healing. And I'm so excited to have you, Judi Miller, here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here, Helen. Thank you.
So I'd love to know what for you has been one of your biggest life challenges and what you learned from that challenge in your life. And if you can, let's look at what happened before the book, and then we'll come back to looking at some of the incredible phenomenon around this book as well. But first, what was Judi Miller like before the book, and the kind of breakthrough that you had that you could say was really life-changing?
Helen, that's a great question. Have you ever felt different, like you didn't belong?
I absolutely have, and I think it's a very common experience. People do have all kinds of struggles, isn't it, when they're trying to come to terms with where their tribe is, where their community is, who really understands them. So yeah, I think it's a very common experience, and I definitely have felt that in my life.
And then also just two other questions for you and your listeners. Maybe you felt incomplete, maybe searching for someone or something outside of yourself to feel whole.
I think there's a very interesting struggle that we go through, like a kind of suffering that happens when we don't feel understood. So for sure, I think there's a lot of searching. And for me in my own life, I think I've felt a lot of spiritual answers to that search in terms of the universe and the cosmos and this incredible thing around us having enormous capacity. And so we feel like we can find it somewhere in that, but it often comes when we understand more and more how magical this place is. There's something that gets filled up inside. I wonder what other people have been feeling and thinking about that question. Good to inquire that.
And then the last question I'll ask you is, have you ever felt unworthy, always having to prove yourself over and over again?
To some degree, not really. I feel very much unique in my own contributions, but I think part of the social program could be that we do at times, certainly as women, I know we go through that more, feel like we have to show up and really prove what we have to offer, sometimes maybe in a different way to men. So I think that's quite a common answer with a lot of women I interview. But yeah, a dance between the two. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Helen, for being so open and candor. I really appreciate that. And the reason I asked you and your listeners these questions is because those feelings have literally plagued me for most of my life. I actually was born in Trinidad, which is an island in the Caribbean off the coast of South America, and I moved to the US when I was very young. I didn't look like other people in my neighborhood. This book is not about race or discrimination. I just did not fit in. I was also born with 11 fingers, and I had the ability to sense and feel different energies, especially at night. And Helen, what I discovered is that no matter what I did, I never felt like I was enough. So I actually started my career as a CPA. I went to work for one of the big four accounting firms in the world. And then I went into corporate finance, working for some of the largest companies in the world. I graduated from the Harvard Business School executive program, but no matter what I did, I felt like I was nothing. And what I learned on this journey, and to answer your question, was that I learned that in the nothingness, I could actually be anything that I wanted. And what I mean by that is when we drop our stories, our labels, and our judgments, we could truly emerge as our true and authentic self. So in response to your question, my life has totally changed. I've been able to let go of those stories and truly find ultimate freedom and happiness.
Beautiful. And what did you learn from all of that, Judi? What did you find is the deeper truth?
What I found in the deeper truth was that we are truly perfect, whole, and complete. And I know that sometimes people have difficulty really grasping that. But on this journey, and hopefully I'll have the opportunity to share the entire story, but I learned that that's all not true. We are truly magnificent beings of life here to change the world and improve the world.
And you spoke about the experience of being a young girl and having extraordinary types of experiences, having different kind of ways of experiencing the world that maybe others didn't talk about or others didn't really talk to you about. So I'm wondering what that was like and what kind of little girl you were in the world. Maybe you can tell us about the young Judi Miller.
Sure. So, as a child, I had fears, and I know that many children have fears. One of them was drowning, but then I had two other fears that I hardly ever spoke of. One was I was terrified of the night. And I'm not talking about like monsters under the bed or monsters in the closet. I'm talking true terror. And because I could sense and feel different energies, I was actually never sure if they were there to help me or to harm me. And I had this fear that I actually never shared with anyone until this book came out. I was actually afraid of being assaulted, and I didn't know where these fears came from. So, Helen, as you could imagine, as a child, these were extremely confusing. So, literally, night after night, I would crawl into bed and I would say the Lord's Prayer over and over again until exhausted, I would fall asleep. And this was my ritual night after night, and it continued well into my 20s.
Wow. And if you knew what you know now, what would you tell that little girl?
There's nothing to be afraid of. We're never alone, never abandoned. We are always loved and supported by the universe.
And you speak now about these very interesting um, aspects of the book, and I'm just reading a little bit for our listeners to know the comments that people have said about this book. You know, the really um, interesting book that we hear a lot about, that I'm sure many of us know about, is, you know, the book about chicken soup for the woman's soul, which is a new version of the classic Chicken Soup for the Soul. And the foreword by Marcy Shimoff, she says, the profound and inspiring processes Judi offers show us how we can transmute fear into love and joy through the power of forgiveness. Perfect, your book that you've written, is a must read for anyone who wants to experience a quantum leap in their joy. And definitely when you share that childhood experience and what it revealed to you about feeling assaulted, being afraid, and then the journey you've made to come into this realization that there is such a profound magnificence and perfection in each of us in our being, certainly is intriguing. Tell us a little bit about the overview of the book and how it actually deals with fear and transmutes it into joy.
Sure, I'd like to give you an overview of the story. So the book is actually broken up into three parts. Most of it is actually written like a novel, because I heard actually most people actually only read the first 19 pages of a book. So I actually 80 to 90% of the book is written as a story that you want to read and actually go on this journey yourself. The other two parts of the book is there's a handful of pages which I call reflections, which basically share with the readers some of the lessons that I learned on the journey and that they could apply in their own lives. And then there's some very simple exercises. And Helen, I made them purposely simple because I know how crazy people's lives are. But how can people truly embody these experiences and apply them in their own life? So that's actually how the book is broken up. But I'd love to share the overall story because it puts everything into context.
Yeah, it's just
So as I mentioned,
thing to work on your fear, and if the book can help you, you know, work on fear, tell us how it's doing that. Yeah, how's the overview laid out?
So as I mentioned, I had these fears as a child, and I met my husband at work. He's actually a CPA also. And when we got married, we had two wonderful kids. But in the exhaustion of raising two incredible children, commuting 3 hours a day to work and working 40 to 50 hours a week, in that exhaustion, Helen, everything went away. The fears, the energies, the subtle whispers, it all went away. But then my kids grew up and they went off to college, and the house became silent. And I know many people could probably relate to that, empty nesters, but the house became silent. And in that silence, everything returned. The subtle energies, the whispers, people asked me what it felt like. It felt like someone was standing behind me or their eyes staring at me from across the room. I would literally tiptoe around my house afraid of what I might encounter. So it must have looked comical to my neighbors. I would wake up at night terrified, clutching at my husband in fear, and soon we both actually began to lose sleep. So around the same time, I actually started to bleed uncontrollably month after month. And I went to see my doctor, and she said that I needed to get a hysterectomy. And Helen, I was terrified of this surgery, and I couldn't understand why. After I left being a CPA, I went to work in finance in the healthcare industry for over 25 years, and I trust modern medicine implicitly. So this fear was unusual, but it felt like the same fear that I had as a child and the same fear that returned to me as an adult. So a good friend of mine recommended that I read a book called Light Emerging by Barbara Brennan. Barbara was actually a former NASA physicist, and she studied the human energy field. And what she learned, she was actually able to heal people. So here I was literally days before my surgery, Googling healers near me. And Helen, as I sat across from my healer for that very first time, I'm extremely auditory. I heard the click of a lock. And in hindsight, I realize now my entire life was locking into place. But I didn't know the role that that healer actually played in my family's history. So she helped me heal after my surgery. And in the following subsequent months, we worked together to explore this uncontrollable fear of the dark. We never talked about, I never even mentioned the fear of being assaulted. So we looked at my childhood experiences to see if anything that actually caused it, but nothing came to light. And then she introduced me to so many new things that I'd actually never heard of. She introduced me to past lives. She introduced me to the amazing work of Dr. Brian Weiss, Dr. Michael Newton, and Dolores Cannon. And then we also started to talk about my parents. We know that we can inherit so many things from our parents: the color of our hair, the color of our eyes, the shape of our nose, and other physical characteristics. But then we started to talk about the science of epigenetics. The science of epigenetics says that we could actually inherit the pain and the trauma that our parents and our ancestors actually experienced. They've actually shown this with Holocaust survivors, that their children and their grandchildren actually hold some of these contracted negative pains and energies in their bodies. They've shown with mice that you could introduce the smell of cherry blossoms to mice and then zap them on the feet. And Helen, as you can imagine, after a while, just the scent of cherry blossoms would trigger the fear in the mice. But what was truly amazing was the mice's children and their children. Just the scent alone would trigger the same panic and fear that their parents experienced. And what we learned on this journey was that that pain and that trauma and that fear that I felt at night wasn't actually my own. It was actually the cellular memory of the trauma that my mother went through when she was a child. I actually never knew until her 80th birthday that she was attacked as a child. So that was a cellular memory. And they also say that all female babies are born with 2 to 3 million of their reproductive eggs at birth. So for much of your mother's life, you were actually in there as a cell. You experienced her triumphs as well as her traumas. So all of that was actually just the cellular memory of the trauma that my mother faced. And by understanding and releasing that, I was actually able to let go of that fear. But Helen, my story actually doesn't end there. There's actually a shocking connection, as I alluded to the very healer I trusted to heal me. And in that moment of revelation, I could have felt fear, I could have felt anger, I could have felt betrayal, but I didn't. All I felt was the immense and incredible love of the universe. Helen, I saw how all of our souls are actually interconnected across lifetimes, how we're unconditionally loved and accepted, and how we could truly never get it wrong. And that's the reason I actually wrote the book Perfect, because as I mentioned in the beginning, for most of my life, I felt different, incomplete, unworthy. But if we knew how much we were loved, we would never be afraid.
I'm with you. If we knew how much we were loved, we would never be afraid. And something else that one of the testimonials for your book alludes to is the spoiler alert. I love this, from John Newton, who works on ancestral clearing and the founder of Health Beyond Belief. He talks about the spoiler alert for your book being that the truth wins out. And I really like that, saying that the book is ready for anyone who's ready for true transformation and is willing to move from the shadow to the light. There are so many things, Judi, in the world now that I think people are struggling with. People are really overwhelmed by the amount of shadow that is coming into the light. and it takes a lot of work to process what's in the shadow. It's the real mystery, and I think the deeper work of any therapist or healer is to really help people and hold the space for them to be able to integrate what's in the shadow. So you literally did that from fear into love, joy, and trust, by encountering the truth, the ancestral link, the intergenerational experience of your mother passing through you. And I loved what you say about the eggs. We talk a lot about that on the Women of Truth work, where we talk about the connection we all have as women to our grandmothers, because we actually hold the eggs of the grandmother in the female womb. So it's very, very powerful for people to be able to really see through your story this profound connection that we all have to our mothers, and how DNA is passing information, and then the whole past life or past generation experience is connected in through all of that. It's been a mystery for a lot of people for such a long time. So with this context now of the world facing what it's facing, you having written this book and really being a testimony to how you transmuted the fear, even invisible fear you didn't even know was related to you in any way, was related to your mom, and coming into this path of joy, what do you think other people could really learn or benefit from reading this book for the time that we're in now?
I think there's a couple of different things. So as you mentioned in the introduction, the subtitle to the book, the subtitle to Perfect, is A Path to Love, Forgiveness, and Transformation. And I believe there's so many different definitions of forgiveness, but for me, it's really, really simple. It means to forego or to let go of. So painful and unwanted events are going to happen to all of us. We could either experience it once, or we could literally play it over and over again in our minds and experience that event hundreds, maybe even thousands of times until it becomes stuck. And it becomes our identity. So for me, forgiveness is really just letting go of those contracted negative stories that no longer serve us, so we could move forward and experience true joy and happiness. So Helen, in response to your question, one of the things that I truly learned on this journey was that it's important to experience life as sensations in our bodies. And what I mean by that is many people create stories about events in their minds, and many of the stories we create are not true. I believe our bodies tell the truth. So for example, I'm going to give you a really simple example. So before I got on this interview with you, my heart was racing, my stomach was fluttering, my throat was becoming dry. And Helen, I could have labeled those sensations as nervousness, but I could have just as easily labeled those sensations as excitement, because they feel exactly the same way in my body. And the reason I wanted to give you that example is sensations are meant to be felt. It's the labels that we put to those sensations that kind of govern our lives that we live. So in my story, it's so important to actually feel our emotions in our body. So whenever I feel a contraction in my body, I actually say thank you. And the reason I say that is because it's my body telling me that there is a story, a trauma, something that I need to release. So getting back to your overall question, I believe there's so much contraction happening on the planet right now and with everyone. There's a lot of division in relationships. There's a lot of natural disasters occurring. There's a lot of contraction happening, especially with COVID-19 as well. And I believe it's the planet's way of saying, now it's an opportunity for all of us to heal. So those contractions that we're feeling now, those shadows that we're feeling now, is an opportunity to heal.
Wow. I love how you pull that all together, and really it is existential. We are going to contract, we are going to expand. Many people listening, I'm sure you've had many moments already where you've seen in your own life where you want to shrink away, you want to move back into the shadow, crawl into a corner, really respond to the fear and the doubt, and that not feeling good enough, not feeling like you're worthy, not knowing where you belong. And of course, you've seen yourself expand. And this is a time for us to really heal. I think it's a very, very good framework for us to put all of our suffering and struggle into that, understanding that this is what we are healing right now. And I would love to hear how you actually came to the final closure for the fear of being attacked or assaulted. How did that finally come into the light? How did you finally accept that and let go of that fear? What did it look like in terms of your experience?
Sure. So our bodies are infinitely intelligent. So those traumas that we talked about that are either our own or our parents or from our ancestors, they literally live in our bodies until we release them. So one of the things with ancestral healing is to truly feel our sensations in our bodies because they become stuck. So for a large part of my life, when people said hurtful or unwanted things, it literally felt like a contraction, like an elephant sitting on my chest, and I couldn't breathe. So the first step is to actually feel those sensations in our bodies, to actually truly experience them. And then as you feel those sensations in your body and you breathe into them, oftentimes an image or memory will come to you. It may be an image from when you were younger, maybe from the womb, maybe even from a past life or from an ancestor. And it oftentimes feels like you're making it up. But as you breathe into that sensation and that image or memory comes to you, what's stressful in that situation and what are you saying to yourself? And in my case and in the story, I was saying, why are you here? I didn't understand why these spirits were here every night. And then when I spoke with my mother, one of the things that was uncovered is that's what she was actually saying to the person that assaulted her. Why are you here? So those memories and those words are actually linked together. So first, acknowledge the sensations in our body rather than creating a story in our minds. Then actually give that younger version of yourself an opportunity, a voice. And then the third part of the recipe is forgiveness. Again, letting go of those stories. So one of my mentors is John Newton. As you mentioned, he is the founder of Health Beyond Belief. And he has a forgiveness recipe and it's included in the book, but I'm just going to recite part of it. And you don't even have to be religious. I realize that people have different faiths or maybe no faith at all, but he calls it a recipe if you're not religious. And I'd just like to recite one line. It says, please help us all forgive each other, forgive ourselves, forgive all people, and all people forgive us completely and totally, please and thank you. So what I found is those three items, feeling the sensations, acknowledging that younger voice, and then forgiving, truly allows us to let go of that trauma that lives in our bodies. Helen, you're actually on mute. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
When you share your story, there's such a realization how important forgiveness is in order to let go of what the body's carrying. And I've heard many people talk about the power of forgiveness, and I know religions have different ways of realizing the power of letting stuff go. Very important that we don't collect our woundings and our pain along the way. So I think it's really important that you're teaching people how to do that without particular religious approach. And in the times we're living in now too, we see a lot of things happening that maybe break our trust or really help us see that there's a lot of forgiveness we need to be busy with. So I wondered if you could also take us a little bit into the difference between the intergenerational or the generational DNA being affected and you having that memory of it and not knowing where it was from. I mean, it's a fascinating thing to think about how many children who are experiencing fear could be carrying things from the previous life of the mother, etc. And the distinction between that and past life experiences. Does your book deal with that difference? And how do you understand it? How could you help the listeners understand the difference?
Sure. So I'll answer the first part of the question.
Mm-hmm.
So our bodies are actually infinitely intelligent, as we were talking about before. So my fear was assault. So where did it manifest? I had a hysterectomy, right? So our bodies are actually, our stories and our traumas actually attached to certain parts of our body. And this is a gross generalization, but for example, if you have a pain in your elbow, it often can mean that you're afraid. Or if you have issues with your legs, it could mean that you can't move forward in life, you feel stuck. Or a pain in the back, taking on too much responsibilities. So our bodies are actually like a giant blueprint, and they actually tell us where these issues and what they relate to. And as you mentioned, this is not new. Louise Hay, the late Louise Hay, who founded Hay House, wrote about this in her book. You can heal your life, you can heal your body. And John Newton teaches this as well. So that's not new. So they actually say that when we heal, we actually heal 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. So when we take the time and the energy to heal those traumas that might not be ours, could be our parents, we're actually healing generations. And I think that's one of the beautiful and most powerful things about this work. So that's the healing the traumas that live in our body. And then I believe the second question was about past lives. And one of the reasons, you know, as I mentioned before, I could have felt fear, anger, betrayal, but I didn't. I saw that we are we always get a second chance no matter what, that there's an opportunity to always heal our lives. So in my book, at the moment of transition, many people talk about in near death experience where they see their lives flash before them, but we also get to come back and heal the one thing that perhaps we would have done differently. And the miracle in this story was that the person that actually assaulted my mother was actually given the opportunity to heal that trauma that passed down. So they are a little bit different, but the story is connected because we get to come back and heal. We can heal in any moment in this life or in any other.
Right. So we have this body that's holding the previous pain or suffering from people that are in our families or in previous generations. And then we also have this body that's holding pain and suffering from when we were last incarnated. If people believe in reincarnation, then that would be an explanation as well, that it could be that you're feeling something that goes into a past life.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And your book is sharing with us this really interesting and profound path to be able to really deal with those experiences and heal whatever it is that might still be stuck or unsolved about them, and then really forgive and let it go.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What a great summary.
Yeah, beautiful. So a very unique content and a very unique story, a very interesting pathway. Everybody listening, if you've ever had any questions about the way this whole universe weaves together all these intricate and interesting phenomenon, and you've wondered about near-death experience, or you've been interested in the whole idea of incarnation and how you live and exist here in this body, this is a very interesting book for you to consider, because it does deal also with generational trauma and how every individual has access then in their own physical body to a path to be able to help heal what is being passed down, both in your own pathway, if you do believe in reincarnation, and or through the generations that come before you that are obviously influencing your DNA. So I think it's a very interesting time for us, Judi, where we are opening up to a lot of new and interesting ways to think about the world. And I know that your book is an Amazon #1 bestseller, and I know that you've got some really interesting people endorsing it over here, and that it's really interesting to know how it fits in with so many healing modalities that you've also trained in, the energy codes and Happy for No Reason and the passion test. And I can see how this whole spiritual journey that you've been on really does take these deeper teachings of complementary medicine deep to heart, because this is really a time, I think, where many people are saying a time for energy medicine, that we are in this time now looking for ways to understand and integrate the body with the mind, soul, and spirit. We used to be separating all these things out, but your book is a really good initiation for all of you out there wanting to know how this all fits together. I think this personal experience that you've had and the whole effort of writing the book to explain it to us can be a very good exercise in learning how to really connect with all of who you are in this lifetime. Tell us, if you can, what you think about this current movement in the world of people waking up, or people beginning to explore a deeper truth, being able to kind of integrate science with spirituality. Do you have any comments about that? Any opinions?
I think it's a wonderful occurrence. I think from a spiritual aspect, there are many things that we've talked about spiritually that science is now catching up to, meaning that they're now actually able to start proving these things. So I think it's an incredible marriage between both.
Beautiful. So thanks so much, Judi, for your time and obviously for the real effort and energy it takes to really put your whole thought together to write a book and to share that experience with other people and to actually document this journey that you were on. For anyone out there wanting to know more about the book itself or more about you and how to connect more with your teachings, your wisdom, your insights, how do they actually access the book and you?
Sure. So they can buy the book on Amazon, but what I recommend is they actually go to my website. My website is Judi Miller. It's spelled Judi with an I, Miller, Miller.net. And the reason I encourage people to go there is because when you buy the book, you actually get 5 free bonus gifts from some of my favorite and also very famous mentors. You mentioned Marcy Shimoff, but Dr. Sue Morter, who wrote the Energy Codes book, Deborah Poneman, some of my other favorite mentors. So those are 5 free gifts. And then just for your listeners, Helen, no charge whatsoever, I have a free ebook called Awaken the Creator Within, which they can find on my website. I have my blog there as well as all of my social media handles.
Brilliant. So we'll put all of that underneath this video. If you want, you can rewatch and listen to those different options. You have lots of free gifts that you can access that really take you deep into this content. And then you can also visit the website and awaken the creator within. Thank you so much, Judi Miller. Last and final words from you, 3 words that capture your wisdom on having been on this journey that really you would like to share with everybody watching, like a prayer for humanity and or a moment of truth from you, Judi Miller, to the world. 3 words.
Sure. So it might be a little longer than 3 words, but when we let go of our stories, labels, and judgments, we see everything through the eyes of love, where there is no separation.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much, everybody, for making time to watch this video. Thank you, Judi. And I really do hope you all get the benefit of these wonderful gifts and really begin to integrate your own consciousness about who you really are. And remember, at XTRAVisionary, we are saying that he or she who has magic needs no tricks. And as you see, Judi Miller has the magic. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Judi. Thanks so much for joining us.
It was great to be here, Helen. Thank you so much.